Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and joined, as always, by my silent Bob to my J, A1, Mr. Brian E. Roach. What's going on, Silent Brian? Ooh, that kind of rhymes. It's got a little flow to it, man. What's up, my man?
I can't talk. I'm silent.
We could picture you just kind of like maybe having your hands in your pockets or something, leaning up against the building, and maybe I'm spazzing all over. You know, this is another one of those things where, you know, based on our physical attributes, you have to be Silent Bob and I have to be Jay. And you also have like a real full beard, so I think, you know, I think it works. I think it works all the way around, man. I mean, it
doesn't work nearly as well as it used to.
Why is that?
Because, Silent Bob is a bit chunky.
No, not anymore. Kevin Smith lost a lot of weight.
That's
just
true.
like
Kevin
you, man.
Smith has lost a ton of weight. That is absolutely true.
Yeah, you guys, see? I mean, you know what? I didn't want to bring it up. I know it makes you a little bashful to bring that up, so I didn't want to bring it up, and then you brought it up anyway, so now it's fair game. But, when are we jumping off the building in Vegas or whatever that's going? Whatever's going on.
I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
You're ready to do that? I'm almost back. Let me tell you, man, I know I brought up my personal the whole, I tell you, physical therapy. I must have had like one of the nastiest non-break ankle sprains, maybe multiple sprains, compounded sprains that ever. Because you know what, it's like it's one of these things where it's real tricky. Even my PT, he told me yesterday. He says, "Hey, I was talking to him. I said I had a whole new respect for." If a player ends up getting like one of these injuries, and this kind of segues into our topic of the day with, we've covered just about everything on offense. We're going to be talking about wide receivers, but he said, ankles are tricky. I mean, you could be looking at 6 months like overall, and it's like, I feel good. It was the first time I got on like a treadmill. I'm on like one of these zero gravity things that, you zip yourself into it. It has an air chamber, and you're kind of like, not necessarily weightless, but a percentage of your body weight. So you're not putting 100% body weight on the injured foot, ankle, et cetera, right? And I'm just thinking to myself, like, man, I'm like, anybody who plays through this type of nagging injury, and trust me, I'm not the kind of guy that would ever just kind of go. I went to physical therapy just based on the foot doctors, like, go to physical therapy, and, it's like, so this is one of these things where it's almost like I'm training, I used to train like an athlete ages ago, but, I'm 38 now. Who does that? You got a kid that's running around, and, life takes over. So, no, and I understand, I'm getting to be an old man here too, and there's an age factor to it, but still, when some of these guys get banged up, and we're going to be talking about wide receivers, and in particular Juju Smith-Schuster, who played injured this year, who knows just how bad that injury was. I mean, if I'm going through all of this, I mean, I could only imagine if you're only sitting for like a week or two and then trying to go out there and make a go of it, and then maybe you can't, you know what I mean? So it's like... Yeah, it's just one of these crazy things. A lot of parallels going on here, between each of our lives. But that was one thing I wanted to throw out there because as we're talking about all the offense and stuff like that, we haven't covered the wide receivers yet. We're looking at free agency standpoint with the Steelers. We're looking at maybe potential draft needs, which become more clear as free agency. If it gets here, who knows what's going on? They moved back, the CBA vote, now the free agency, or the franchise tag or transition tagging things gotten moved back. The whole schedule has just gotten moved back so far, and then legal tampering and all that. It's going to be in about a week. It's going to be just like rapid fire lightning round news of players getting signed. Like nothing's moving right now, and everybody's talking about, well, can the Steelers sign this guy or this guy? And and people are getting annoyed with that. One being, they don't have any money, but the other thing is like you got a lot of these clowns out there reporting some stuff, and they're talking about that Bud Dupree either isn't worth it or the Steelers don't have salary. They know enough that the Steelers don't have salary cap, but then they don't realize that this all hinges on whether the CBA goes through or not. The Steelers are going to have tough decisions to make. They'll have lesser of those tough decisions to make, maybe none at all, and can just slide a contract to Dupree. if this CBA goes through, and everybody just thinks of, hey, it's only going to go up $30 million this year. Well, if you offer the guy like a multiple year contract, like 3-4 years, they're going to spread that money around, and the cap's going to continue to go up in subsequent years as well. And I understand there's some percentages and some people's minimums and things like that go up, but it's all going up. The players are voting to make more money. So there's going to be more money in the pool to what? Pay the players. That's how it works. So, I just I get annoyed when I'm seeing this stuff that's out there, and it's just kind of like, hey, everybody, you got to pump your brakes on this. It's like the Tom Brady news. He's not talking with the Patriots, or nobody's talking. Nobody's doing anything. There's hardly any movement unless you're one of these basement teams that has a boatload of money to spend. Everybody else is kind of standing firm and waiting to see what goes on with the CBA.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of speculation based on when the CBA gets passed, if it gets passed, and what they have to do. And it's going to play not just for the Steelers, but heavily for the Steelers. It's going to play into a lot of what their future plans are and how they're going to be capable of managing cap and who they sign and what they don't. It's just a fact of life.
It sure is. You know what else? You got the Steel. No. You got more bonus football for the Steelers. So not only might there be a 17th game in the regular season, there's going to be an extra preseason game. So if they cut down preseason games, we won't know because they're going to play the Cowboys. Just announced at Canton, Pro Football Hall of Fame game, and I love that they show like a picture of Ben Roethlisberger to promote this because there's probably a negative 1,000% chance. Is that how that works? That he's not going to play. He is not going to play.
There's no shot. Zero.
I don't care what the math is. Yes, it's zero. It's not Dumb and Dumber where you go, so you're saying there's a chance. No, I'm not. No chance. So, but I laugh when they show his photo on there, and I've already seen some, smart Alex out there saying, well, I hope they got the turf fixed. Well, they demolished the stadium, so there's a whole new stadium out there. In fact, if you remember, they replaced the turf and then didn't play a game on it because the paint was sticky. So, they didn't want to play at all. I mean, the NFL has had some disasters with fields. You talk about Sean Sweesham in that Hall of Fame game. That'll definitely stick in our memory for a long time as Steelers fans, but not only that, the other Hall of Fame game with the paint, you had when the Rams were still in St. Louis, you had the turf that caught fire. But the last year was probably the worst. You talk about preseason games. What was it? The Packers played up in Winnipeg, I believe, on one of the CFL fields, and they had to shorten it because if you're not aware, the Canadian Football League has the field goal posts in the end zone, old school black and white NFL film stuff. You know what I mean? And the hole or whatever for that, the post was in the way. They thought it presented a danger, so they shortened the field even more to 80 yards, and they just put up some cones or something. It was the most bizarre thing, and I'm like, you're talking about a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar, maybe trillion-dollar industry at some point here with the NFL, global industry here, And they can't get this right with the field. So, yes, I do hope the field is okay in Canton. I have no reason to believe it won't be because they've been playing on it ever since they redid. They totally redid the entire stadium. I remember even driving through there, and they had half of it demolished and half of it up. And so it's been a process over the last several years that there's been a not even just a plethora, I think more like a double plethora of money that's just been spent on getting the Hall of Fame and everything, ship shape. So
yeah,
I hate having that game just for the sake of. It's exciting.
Wear and tear.
It's wear and tear, but who's it really wear and tear on? We're talking about the guys that are numbers 70 through 90 on the roster. You're not going to see anything that's really, I don't think, exciting play. With 5 quarterbacks on the roster right now, and who knows who sticks by that time, I wouldn't be surprised to see a Duck Hodges and Paxton Lynch share a half each. You don't even see Ben or Mason Rudolph maybe. I don't know. There's a lot of risk. You know what I mean? It's just it scares you because of what happened with Sean Sweesham. So, but I guess you're going to have that in any game. The fact is the preseason games literally don't count for anything except for evaluation of players. So the risk that's there. If you have a multi-million-dollar guy, let's say Ben, for example, that plays in it and then re-injures it, and then you're without him for the whole season again, it's you see how that goes, being a Steelers fan and watching in 2019, for most of the people that were paying attention anyway.
Yeah, look, That's always the biggest concern with preseason period. And adding a fifth preseason game just compounds it. But you're absolutely right. Who's going to play in the Hall of Fame game? Maybe Mason Rudolph. Maybe not. Maybe the third string quarterback. More than likely, it's not going to be guys that you're overly concerned with. But there are areas on the team where there's a certain amount of thinness, right? And you're going to be playing guys that you're counting on as depth. And so there is risk there. I'm not a big proponent of adding preseason games. I would be quite content with deleting 2 preseason games and making the starters actually play in them. Knock it down to 2, have them actually play so that we have better quality football at the beginning of the season as opposed to continued preseason efforts because they haven't played and they're still rusty. But it is what it is. It's an extra game. I guess you can look at it like we get an extra week of Steelers football as a result. Training camp will start earlier than normal because of it. So that all kind of gets the season underway a little sooner than it normally would. So that's a positive, I guess.
Yeah, I was looking at last year's Hall of Fame game, Broncos and Falcons. I love reading it, though, when it says, like, Denver Broncos at Atlanta Falcons at Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium, Canton, Ohio. It's not in Atlanta, but I guess the Steelers are considered the home team for this. I don't know what that means. The Cowboys get to call the coin toss. I mean, it's kind of silly. Well, you know what? Maybe it's because they get to wear black at home. Maybe that has something to do with it.
That could be.
But do you really think, the Cowboys almost always exclusively wear white. Very rarely. I think last year was the most I've ever seen them wear, like, the blue tops. If you think about it, anyone listening is probably stretching to even think what those uniforms look like because they very rarely wear the blue. They try and wear white everywhere they go. Kind of like the Dolphins, too. Dolphins are another team. Colts often wear white. So you got these teams. I don't understand that sometimes. Then you got did you see the Cleveland Browns uniform leak? I hope that's not their uniforms. They look even worse than they were. But those guys, they just can't figure out any combination of brown and orange. Maybe because they're terrible colors to begin with. And that's saying something. Orange is my favorite color, but you mix brown with it and you put it in Cleveland, all bets are off. They can't figure out if they want to wear white pants, orange pants. It's like that's all they keep talking about. It's like, Then you got the Rams with their logo that looks like somebody with longer hair, like an emo or Jessica Rabbit or something, covering like half of their face. It looks like somebody just has their hair covering their one side of their face. But I derailed there, but it's just some of the terrible branding things that are going on. And if there's any soccer people out there, or even if you're not, go look at the Chicago Fire logo. It looks like something you could have. Brian, I don't know if you're very artistically inclined. I am. I don't even know. Like, I could probably be blindfolded, spun around 5 times, hand me like a red crayon and a yellow crayon, and I could have drew this Chicago Fire logo. That's how bad it is. So regardless, regardless of the Rams trying to rebrand some things in a new stadium and this and that and get everyone in LA excited about football. I don't get some of these things. Maybe, Derek said it, and we've been saying it for a while. Maybe they'll finally get like helmets that match the jerseys because it's like they still kept the St. Louis style jerseys with that gold, and then they started wearing like either like the white ram horns or they had the throwbacks that actually looked like the old blue and the yellow that they had there. So we'll see. But anyways, aside from all the extra football, yeah, you're right. Training camps going to be starting earlier and things of that nature. So it changes some of our battle plans, I guess. But we're planning on being in Canton anyways to see the plethora of Steelers that are going in for the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely,
yeah. So that'll be exciting. The game itself, people will buy the tickets, and I'll tell you why. Because there's a lot of Steelers fans and a lot of Cowboys fans, and both fan bases travel. So I expect there to be people in the stands. I don't know. I'm not particularly excited to spend even $10 on a ticket for a game like that. So I'll watch at home or something. I get the experience to go there. You get to see the team. If you're going already for the Hall of Fame ceremonies and you're from out of town and you've booked a room and things like that, then by all means go experience it. But I guess maybe I'm just spoiled or I'm just soured on preseason games, and I could really care less about them.
Yeah, like you said, the point of preseason is really for the coaches to evaluate who they have at depth and what they think these guys are going to provide them, and weed out the roster from the abundant level it will be at during training camp down to essentially a 53-man roster, plus a practice squad. So what they're going to do with that time is not necessarily all that exciting. It's not, it's bland football. They're not going to be showing every wrinkle that they put into place for the season. And like I said, it's evaluation. It's football, but it's sort of not. Why go crazy?
Yeah, I'll backtrack a little bit. I'll say the Hall of Fame game is what really I don't care about. I still go to a preseason game, and if I happen to go, week one's really always exciting. The first game's exciting. You get to see people on the field. Typically, like rookies, you get to see them for the first time. You don't see a whole lot of anything else. Week two, you might see a little more of a blend, some starters. So weeks 2 and 3 are like, those are the big ones for me. I kind of like that. Week 4, it's like, forget about it. In fact, I was just, researching this because we always do the recall. And right now, going back and looking at the 2019 season over on the website, and this is probably like the 5th or 6th article. I think I did free agency, and then I did like the draft, and now I'm on the 4th week of the preseason. And I forgot that, the week 3 was the game where they had the miserable sky cam and you couldn't see anything that was going on. So even for evaluation purposes, it totally destroyed my enjoyment of – it was the dress rehearsal too. It was a Sunday night game. It was on NBC. And then they went and played – they went from Sunday night and played in Carolina on Thursday, which meant nobody was playing in that game. Just a few guys that were fighting for a roster spot like Tazar Skipper, who – I had actually forgotten he hadn't even played any special team snaps up until that point, and everybody wanted to say, well, if he has an inroads to making the roster, he's got, it's going to be special teams, and then they don't have him on any of the coverage units. So it's like, well, where is his inroads? That was like something that was a little bizarre. So they finally got him out there, and I think that's more or less was a byproduct of, hey, we're playing like another game in like 4 days. It was like literally like the real NFL schedule wouldn't even work that way. I don't think you would ever go from a Sunday night to a Thursday night game. So, but anyway, we were talking to offense most of the time. Yep. I haven't brought up quarterbacks yet. Just lightly, I said who might play in the Hall of Fame game, just so nobody else has to be exposed to it. And, this is like the Hall of Fame games where you see, I remember even back then, I think it was like Landry Jones got like the most snaps of like the preseason overall, like in the entire league, because he played almost like the full game that year, I want to say. And he was throwing the guys like Shaquem Phillips, for example. So, we're looking at, we're not looking at quarterbacks. If you want to hear anything about quarterbacks, I think running backs, we really beat the dead horse on tight end, quarterback. We talked about Steelers team needs. Right. Yep. And I think we're in agreement that if they went with offensive line, and I think particularly second round interior offensive line seems to be a real sweet spot, because you could see some tackles and stuff go in the first round or obviously before. What pick are they? 52, 50, something?
49, I think.
49. Oh, well, close enough. So it's like 50 picks in. So you're going to see some tackles and stuff go. You might see some running backs on the board. But the second round always seems to be that spot where the Steelers try and go out in a surprise everybody. We all do this all year, all during the draft season. We're looking at, who could go here, and somehow you end up with, 50, 60, 70 first round guys that are going to go in the first round. Well, they can't all go in the first round. Then all of a sudden you're like, aha, totally forgot about that guy. That happened to me twice, Brian. I don't know if you had the same kind of reaction or experience with this, but Stephon Tuitt was one where I was like, man, I forgot that guy was on the board. And I was ecstatic. That was a nice second-round pick. Now, Le'Veon Bell, I had my eye on, but Gio Bernard went right before that. And I remember I was looking at Eddie Lacy, and Eddie Lacy was sitting there, and then they went running back, but they went with Bell. And I'm like, interesting. You know what I mean? And we see how that turned out. So not too bad. But the other one was – not too bad at all. Well, the other two were I'll go to one of the more recent ones, James Washington, who I think everybody, after Martavis Bryant got traded, everybody was like pointing at him, and then they got him. And then the one that surprised me was Juju Smith-Schuster. And I think we're in a similar situation this season. Even looking back to last season, everybody was like, hey, we got to replace Antonio Brown, this and that. How are they going to do that? And moot point because the quarterbacks, I think, kind of stuck it to the wide receivers for most of 2019, putting it lightly. So, when they took Juju, it was one of those instances where, why'd they take this guy? You don't really need this guy. This is a luxury pick, yada, yada, yada. And then he did really great. Now everybody's down on him again, and it comes back to my bum foot and my experience and thinking about how, this poor young man, all intents and purposes for me and you, a kid, but he's still very young in this league. What is he, like maybe 23, 24 at this point? He's going to be entering his fourth year as a pro football player. It's insane. So, he tried to play injured, and aside from that and the quarterback play and missing games and everything like that, he didn't have quite the season that you would think of. Everyone out there was like, hey, we need some playmakers, sign a wide receiver, draft a wide receiver. Well, I'm on the fence here, but like the way we talked earlier when we were talking about running backs and we were talking about depth charts, and we're going to go through and talk about some of these guys. I'm not a guy that feels that wide receiver is a need. I'm not sure that wide receiver is even a want. But if they went wide receiver and there's a prospect there and you have a chance to upgrade, I don't think I'm going to be bent out of shape about it. If they bring in, I don't see a free agent just based on, it's still a money thing. But I think they're comfortable where they are. Then they could bring in somebody that's cheaper on a rookie contract. So if they draft somebody, I won't be bent out of shape about it.
No, I am. The more I look at the wide receiver group that we have, the more I try and determine, how they're going to spread the ball around and who's going to be able to do what. The more I'm convinced that they actually do need a wide receiver, and it's because I feel like there is a specific missing part to that room, and I'm just not sure whether they've got the guy that's going to be able to do it. And that is, it's exactly what you were talking about with Martavis Bryant. Look, Johnny Holton, great, wonderful, fast guy, can't catch. He's DHB part 2.
Why is it he didn't get the same amount of criticism? I
don't know.
I think it's just because of maybe the comp pick factor and that he wasn't making as much money. Those are the only two things that make sense to me. Yeah,
but that it's the guy who's the deep threat. And while I think Deontay Johnson is a really nice receiver and can grow heavily. Again, he's got quickness more so than I feel like he's got speed. James Washington is a great combat catch guy, but I don't see him leaving guys in the dirt and causing tremendous fear that they're going to get burnt. It's the same with Juju. Juju's a little faster than I think we think he is. He's got some sneaky speed. But again, he's not going to cause other defenses to go, crap, he got behind me, for the most part. So I feel like there's a missing component to what they want. And with Ben coming back, a guy who we know sometimes will on 3rd and 1, throw the ball 90 yards down the field or whatever, and they make those kind of plays. It's that kind of guy that they need. And so it will not, while I don't know that it's a desperate need because I like the room that they have, I like what they've got. There's a part of me that goes that what they've got is a bunch of number 2s or 1As or 1Bs, excuse me. They don't have a 1 that is clearly defined. Even though that's supposed to be Juju's role, I'm not convinced he can be a 1. I wasn't convinced last year. But I hope I'm wrong. I just don't know. I won't say that I doubt he can be. I'm just not convinced he can be. So it's like when you said on the fence, that really kind of describes my position. And I feel the same way. I won't be bent out of shape if they take a wide receiver at 2. I am absolutely 100% convinced at some point in this draft they will take a wide receiver. There is no question in my mind. The question will be how high up they do the draft of a wide receiver.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely, you took the words out of my mouth. There's almost every year they take somebody and they try and see if they could develop them into into a starter, into a contributor. Yep. So I don't think there's any doubt. The doubt with me, I think Juju is a one. But much like when you're in a position of why did you draft Juju? Okay, he's entering what is his fourth season, right? This is a contract year. This is a contract year. He's a second-round pick, so there's no fifth-year option on him, and they're going to have to figure out if they're going to extend him now or wait. And waiting could drive up the price tag. The Steelers generally get these deals done with wide receivers ahead of time, and where do they have their money invested in any of the wide receiver core at this point? Nobody, so they don't have any kind of high dollar or high priced guy that's there already. And more than likely it'll end up being Juju. Now, I think he needs a compliment, but as far as another player who could take the heat off of him, and a lot of people were speculating whether or not he could still put up the same numbers without Antonio Brown. Well, guess what? We never really did figure that out because nobody really put up any numbers with Mason Rudolph or Duck Hodges. And if you want to believe me as to how painful or how well, I don't want to say pain. Well, the offense was painful to watch, but the quarterback play. Hey, go back to when Michael Vick and Landry Jones had the killer bees, or at least most of them. Even if it wasn't Bell in the backfield, he at least had D'Angelo Williams. Not much of a drop off there, right? And right. Just look at the stat. Like Antonio Brown went from consecutive catch streaks, what was it, like 5 catches a game with 50 yards or whatever. He had like some type of unheard of, never before has it ever happened in the NFL type of streak going. And when Ben got hurt, that went by the wayside. Like Michael Vick could not connect with one of the guys who was probably the best wide receiver in the league at that point, playing in his prime. And Martavis Bryant had a little bit more actually success, but it wasn't like these guys were lighting the world on fire. It's not like they were lighting up scoreboards with the points. The running game also suffered to some degree there. I think that's a lot of parallels, a lot of the similar situation they dealt with in 2019. So I'm not willing to just immediately write off Juju and say, well, you know what, just draft a guy and then, don't pay this guy or whatever else. He's still a young enough guy. This isn't going to be his first contract, you know what I mean, or his next contract or his only contract, as we say with a lot of wide receivers who fall off. Right now, hold on, I meant to look up his age, so I actually had it. He's 23 years old as of November 22nd. So we say the fall-off point is 31. And guy's got like 8 years left. He's got like 2 contracts still to go here. So this is somebody that if you feel that they could carry the load, that's your guy. Now, I do agree with one thing here. I think they need somebody that is like a bigger body, maybe a straight line runner or whatever else. You look at the rest of the depth chart, and we'll see who we think, might be safe or on the fence here or whatever. Johnny Holton is a guy. He's 6'3", 190. He's 28 years old. He's been around. Like, he's pretty much like, I hate saying this because he's on the roster right now, but this is the kind of guy that also ends up in the XFL because, it's a guy that may have had a few seasons in the league, in the NFL, and then they're journeymen, and then they don't stick to a roster for whatever particular reason, and then they end up playing, in the XFL. And you see that there's actually a guy that he was with the Steelers for like 5 days. What is it? I can't remember his first name. I think his last name is Washington as well. And I think he plays for the St. Louis Battlehawks. And it's like, he's been grinding. I think he was with the Steelers in like 2011 or something. The guy's been grinding forever. And you see a few other veteran kind of players in that league. That's kind of where I see Johnny Holton. And Johnny Holton, I've been burned a lot of times, Brian. I was thinking about this topic, and I was thinking about, like, Marcus Wheaton and Sammy Coates and some guys like that and Dante Moncrief, where, I felt that they could be a compliment or added to this roster. And, each of those guys, to some extent, dealt with some sort of injuries, too, that kind of, shows you just how quick and how expendable wide receivers are in the NFL. So I feel that this is somewhere that the Steelers aren't set on, outside of Juju's not going anywhere, I don't think. And I think we got a couple other guys to talk about here that are probably okay safe, but you look at that next guy, and I try to look at like James Washington, for example. And, Juju had a lot of success coming out of the slot. They move these guys around all over. James Washington, he's flashed. And I looked at I was just thinking his rookie year that he didn't play a whole lot. And I was absolutely, and his numbers, reflect that. And I was absolutely wrong about that. He played 526 out of 1,117 snaps, almost half. That's 47%. And when you look at some of the other wide receivers, okay, of course, AB played, and this is 2018. And this is also because why his numbers would suffer, because AB was still on the team. AB played all but obviously that last game of the season. So Antonio Brown was a snap short of playing 1,000 snaps that year. He played like 89%. I think Juju was somewhere, 86%, 960 snaps. So when you're looking at the wide receiver core there, Washington's trying to get inserted in there. And you still had Eli Rogers, who was hurt for most of the year. He came back for the last 3 games of the 2018 season. And then Ryan Switzer. And they were pretty much almost kind of like the same guys almost. They were also slot receivers too. And we'll talk about, where that fits in. But that's where I'm trying to figure out with Washington. He flashed. He certainly looks like a guy that's a possession receiver, like you said, combat catches. And he was 3rd on the team with 44 receptions, but he was targeted 80 times. And I mean, it's one of those things where, okay, Deontay Johnson led the team with 59 on 92 targets. So he got thrown to a little bit more, and he caught more of his passes. And even Juju had some problems with some drops, and he had 10 less targets, but only caught 2 less balls. So I don't know. Some of that is quarterback play, and it's, having bad passes thrown in your direction. So I get that. But, 735 yards, not too bad. 3 touchdowns. Is he going to take the leap in year 3? Is he the type of guy to help so teams don't double a healthy Juju Smith-Schuster? Or, I'm gonna serve this up to you on a platter, or is that guy that's going to get behind the defenses, maybe not the fastest guy when you're looking, you got to stopwatch and you're doing the 40 times, but deceptively fast in the fact that he has quick breaks, he has the moves that can get behind somebody, much like an Antonio Brown did in a you hate comparing it to him, and it's like one of those things when you're trying to replace somebody, like Troy Polamalu or Jerome Bettis, who's the next guy. But Deontay Johnson has kind of flashed that type of stuff, and I kind of wonder, as he emerged later in the season, this could be the top 3 guys, maybe, definitely for the kickoff weekend. But could you imagine adding something else, another dynamic to that? I think the Steelers will look at drafting someone, like you said. I just don't know how high.
Yeah, look, I'm really encouraged about the kind of receiver that Deontay Johnson can be. He showed some rookie stumbling points last season. He was a little loose with the ball, let's say, at times, but he did show that, I guess you want to call it that suddenness, right? That ability to suddenly change direction, to decoy a defensive back into making the wrong move and then take advantage of it. He did show some of that, and yes, it was very Antonio Brown-esque. And you're right, you don't want to put that kind of pressure on a young player, but he has similar qualities to what Antonio Brown had, which means, yes, at times he might be able to get into the open. He might be a guy that's going to cause coverages to break down because he, jukes them out of their shoes. But I still don't know that he gets people to fear them with his straight line speed. Not nearly as much, but I think that there's a very good chance that Deontay Johnson could evolve into the number 1 receiver, because I still think that Juju's best position is in the slot. I think that's where he provides the best mismatches. I feel like that's where he has his best success. And, you generally don't have your number one guy running in the slot most of the time. But I think, you could put him outside some, but again, I think he's more productive and more effective in the slot. James Washington, as you said, look, I don't know. I want James Washington to be really good. But he was better last year than he was in his rookie season. So if that progression continues, who knows? But it's the same thing. Is he going to be the guy that is wide open, or is he going to be the guy that is downfield and takes goes up for a catch with the DB hanging all over him and makes these catches where we're all like, our eyes bug out because they're amazing? I don't know. I still think that dynamic may be missing. So yeah, that's why it won't surprise me if they they're going to draft a wide receiver, and it won't surprise me if they do it early. I think it's all going to depend on how the board falls. If the right players are there for them, and you've got the value that they want. Who knows? If somebody that they've touted as very high, a first round pick, is sitting there at 49, they may just feel like, look, yeah, we wanted to go this direction, but we can't believe this guy's here, so that's who we're taking. You never know. It'll be interesting to see how it does turn out.
Yeah, and even if they do take a guy, I don't expect them to be seen for half a season.
Oh, no, probably not.
That's kind of the way Mike Tomlin operates with this stuff, and I think they're in a position where they don't have to force anyone out on the field. I think Deontay Johnson had to come out there, more or less because of lack of offense and also injuries. I'm trying to see, it's not like he wasn't playing, though, right out the gate. He was getting maybe like 20-some snaps. I look, and then you get to like week 5, and all of a sudden he's playing 90% of the game or so. Smith-Schuster was still there. Washington had seen some of his numbers dip. Of course, he got hurt in that week 5 game and then missed the following week too. And then that was the only game that he really missed. When you get down to it, Washington ended up playing about 2/3 of the offensive snaps for the season, whereas Juju Smith-Schuster was only out there 57% of all the offensive snaps. So that just goes to show you that's why Juju kind of disappeared, and you shouldn't be down on him. He was around for half the season, and for how much of that with Big Ben, 6 quarters. So and make no mistake about this either. Who was the defensive MVP? In the NFL this past year? Should have been T.J. Watt, I understand, but it was Stephon Gilmore, and that's who they were lining up against in week 1. So you have 4 quarters against, one of the top flight corners in the entire NFL, shutdown guy, lockdown guy, you know what I mean? So so even then, there's like 2 quarters with Ben against the Seahawks, and I know the Seahawks they're not the Legion of Boom anymore, but hey, still nothing to sneeze at in terms of, how their team operates and their defense, et cetera, et cetera. The one where I'm kind of interested in, I think I told you, it was 1,018 snaps for the 2019 season. So a little over 1,000 snaps. It's the guy who played 81 of those, and he got hurt too and got put on IR. And it's like, where do you fit Ryan Switzer into this type of deal? Because Steelers, they've kept 6 wide receivers. I don't know that they'll continue to keep 6. They had 6 at one point last year, but I don't think it started that way. I think Holton was on the practice squad to begin with, and then they ended up adding him. And then obviously there's some other names that moved around here too. But it's much like the reason why I see Eli Rogers beating up people in the XFL, and I still think he's pretty great and stuff too. But you see a lot of the same things, and versatility is another one of those abilities that helps keep you employed with one of these NFL teams. And Switzer was being looked at as a kick returner and a punt returner, and he is not. For whatever reason, Mike Tomlin could just never find the right guy there. And when he used Juju, then all of a sudden Juju ascended as a wide receiver, and he couldn't use him there anymore, or didn't want to. You know what I mean? Right. He even played around with Martavis Bryant playing back there at one point, returning kicks and whatnot too. So, I understand that Switzer's more probably like a Ben guy, but yeah. He came out. He played a lot. He played a lot against the Patriots. 67% of the game. Played about a quarter of the game against the Seahawks, and they yanked him because they had to protect Mason Rudolph and trying to win a game. Can't run these fancy 4 and 5 wide receiver sets anymore. Then he disappeared completely for 2 games. Didn't play. As some of those, he wasn't even injured. He just did not play. He was still out there on special teams. He was just not getting on the field. We're talking after missing out on playing offense for 2 straight weeks. He comes in and plays 2, 6, 2, 8, and 4 snaps, and then he's gone for the rest of the season. I don't even remember what really happened to him, to be completely honest.
Can I tell you?
Yeah, well, go ahead.
What happened to him is he couldn't make anybody miss. That's what happened to him. Look, we said this. I remember saying this exact quote at some point in the last season. The Ryan Switzer experiment needs to be over. I understand he's Ben's buddy, but 3-yard catch and fall down, or 3-yard catch and tackle, or catch the punt and go 2 yards backwards, but run around for 10. And then head out of bounds. I'm over the Ryan Switzer love. I think he's a great guy. I like him. I'm sure he's a wonderful teammate. I think it's time to move on.
Well, and you know what? There's something to that. And it's the same thing. Somebody else is going to come here and say, well, Eli Rogers. Now, hold on a second. I'm going to go back to 2018 when they had Ben, and Ben threw for 5,129 yards with 34 touchdowns. So you had 2,000 over 1,000-yard receivers, each with 100 receptions or more in both Juju and AB. And then you get down here and you see, okay, Ryan Switzer. Now, he did have 36 catches on 44 targets, right? But 7 yards of reception. That was behind. Not only did he have fewer yards, receptions, and yards per reception than James Conner, that is also almost true of Jalen Samuels. Jalen Samuels had 10 less catches, but he was even getting 7.7 and just fell short about 50 yards less on only 10 less catches. You know what I mean? You think Jalen Samuels could have picked up at least 50 yards on 10 more catches? I think so. So the running backs are doing better. Jesse James. There's a guy that we talked about, blow on him and he's pretty much tackled. No real acceleration after the catch. That's where Juju really is with his speed. It's after he starts to accelerate after he gets the ball, and then he's hard to catch maybe. But Vance McDonald too. These guys were getting. Jesse had 14.1. Vance had 12.2. Jesse had 30 catches. Vance had 50 catches. I mean, it really shows you just how stagnant the offense was last season. Because you look at the guys who were the receptions leaders. I said Deontay Johnson led everyone with just 59. There wasn't even anybody who got 100 targets, Brian. And I understand the Steelers offensively. They played. Let's see here. 31 different people on offense. Tyson Alualu had 1 snap as a fullback, so essentially it had 30 different guys playing in the 11 positions on offense last year, which is a lot. That's a lot of mixing and matching and guys that are injured. And I understand stats can be wherever, but it's still I look at this. Let me see. Deontay Johnson, 59 receptions. Jalen Samuels, 47. James Washington, 44. Juju, 42. Vance, 38. Connor, 34. You get to Ryan Switzer. He had 8 for 27, 3.4 yards. And it's, it's putrid. It's absolutely terrible. The only guy that was like in the same ballpark was Deontay Moncrief, and he only had 4 catches for 18 yards. I remember Deontay Moncrief getting like a screen pass or 2 and losing yards, and I want to say that Ryan Switzer was in the same boat. I think his job could be in jeopardy. We talk about just a random fill-in-the-blank player that could be drafted. I think they could immediately come in because I look at everybody else. There's one name I'm leaving off, and I think you already know who I like to make this roster. But I'll mention him last. So we already mentioned Johnny Holton. He'll be competing. You have some other guys who've gotten like futures contracts like Jamal Custis or Amara Darboh, who, he was a futures guy, but he was added to the practice squad late in the year. He may have even made the active roster just because of how many bodies they didn't have. Quadri Henderson was brought back. He's from Pitt. He was a guy that was brought into camp to compete as a returner. He's the same size as Switzer. It's another one of these 5'8", about $185, 190 kind of guys that are supposed to be fast and do whatever, but Quadri couldn't make the team several years ago. He went up to the Giants and pretty much the same kind of story there, so he's bouncing around. And then finally, one of the guys they added that I like, he's 6'2", 202. He's young. He's 23 years old. From Clemson, Deion Kane, who, for whatever reason, fell out of favor with that coaching staff. What was he, a fourth-round pick, I think, with the Colts? Yeah, I mean, they basically, there's a guy we were looking at during the draft process, and, they ended up signing him off the practice squad because, it's whatever reason, he didn't make the actual team, and that was weird. Oh, you know what? I said fourth round. He was a sixth-rounder, 2018. Yeah, okay, so a second-year kind of guy. But as somebody we were looking at with, size and ability and being able to play, like the Steelers like, a guy that's versatile, that could play inside or outside, long arms, straight line speed. We just got to see if he can put it together, because usually if that guy, you have all these things on paper, there's no reason the Colts are just as much in need of playmakers as the Steelers or any other NFL team. You don't let a guy like this just go. So
Right.
The Steelers snagged him because they had an opportunity. It was somebody that they saw in the process and felt could be added, could help the roster. I think that's somebody that, if you're looking at players that you're going to try and develop, we already said Juju's not going anywhere. There's no reason for James Washington or Deontay Johnson to go anywhere. There's 3 of your 5 or 6 wide receivers. So you got a random body that's probably going to be drafted. I don't know if they're going to they could get a free agent, but if they get a free agent, it's going to be like a Justin Hunter or a guy that's maybe on a minimum, or a Darius Hayward-Bay that's going to be special team / hardly ever see the field on offense type of guy. That would be maybe your 6th guy if you have him there. So you're looking at a draft pick, then you're basically looking at where's Ryan Switzer and some of these other guys fall. I think Deion Kane is kind of the other guy to put into that discussion.
Absolutely. I like Deion Kane. I liked when they grabbed him off the Colts practice squad. I like the potential that he has, and coming in, with a full season, with a full preseason, it'll be interesting to see whether he can, expand on the limited success he had last season. And you kind of give most of the wide receiving crew a pass to a certain extent for last season, and you understand that the numbers were not going to be there because the quarterback play was terrible. And so you kind of just you give him a little bit of a pass. Deion Kane is the kind of guy that Ben will enjoy throwing to, but I think a lot of these guys are. The knock on Deion Kane is exactly what you said. Look, every team needs explosive playmakers. So if they could get him off somebody else's practice squad, what does that really tell you? It tells you that he's got some potential, but he hasn't developed it yet. So he's a question mark. I like what he could be. We just have to wait and see if he can be it. But look, it's not a bad room, as we've said. But it's not. It's also not the room it used to be. You know what I mean? It's not the room where everybody around the league goes, crap, I don't want to play those guys.
And how did it become that way? Because we were still talking even last year, even with the loss of Antonio Brown, that was still seemed like it was going to be a pretty formidable group. You know what it is, Brian?
What?
Big Ben.
Yes,
that's what changes it all.
There's no question. There's no question about it. That's what changes that room. And wide receiver play is very dependent on quarterback play. And when you have bad quarterback play, you're not going to get the production you need. And we could see it so much in when you look at tape and when you look at film from last season, where Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges simply did not trust themselves to make throws that Ben would have absolutely trusted himself to make. So you get less opportunity for those guys to make plays, less opportunity for big plays, because they're not willing to take the chance that maybe Ben would, because he has the confidence in both his arm and in his receivers to make that play happen.
Yeah, exactly. And, Deion Kane is kind of the guy that Ben, I think, would like to target. Like I said, a little bit taller at 6'2". He's basically the same size as Juju. And, I liked that type of pickup. He got to play just real sparingly. I mean, the Colts, he caught 4 balls. I guess he was targeted 14 times. I guess I would have to see some of the Colts film because it was Jacoby Brissett. Well, I guess they had some other guys playing too, like Hoyer and stuff like that didn't work out so well. But he caught 5 of the 6 targets that came his way. He had the one big 35-yard play. And even though we talk about how bad some of the quarterback play was, some of the, I go through these plays of the year and you see some of the splash plays that did occur, and there were still quite a few of them. There was, Duck Hodges finding James Washington with one of the Bengals guys that fell down and taking it to the house. That ends up winning them that game. There was a flea flicker to Mason Rudolph to Juju. Mason Rudolph finding Deontay Johnson on a deep ball too. I mean, so, almost like a circus catch type thing. And I think there was like 2 in the same game, but there was the one they said wasn't a catch that looked like a catch. And then there was the one they said that was a catch that didn't look like a catch. And we have no idea what they're thinking because they're not very transparent with the officiating in the NFL. So, it's one of those things where there was growing pains to go around with everything.
Oh God! Yes.
So with consistent quarterback play, you might see twice as many of those splash plays. Now I understand there's still all the asterisks on Ben and everything like that. So don't come with the pitchforks and the torches and the hate mail. We understand, we get it, but we're just kind of putting a bow on all of the offense. Since we talked about every other position, we kind of just, left out wide receiver. And when I looked at this, I said, maybe they won't make too many changes, but then giving it another look-see here. Man, they could easily add a body here. They could even add 2 bodies. But, I mean, some of the names that always get floated around. I know last year John Brown was one of those guys. They got Moncrief. They actually paid Moncrief a little bit more than I was kind of surprised than what they would usually pay for somebody to come in. Like I said, they're usually trying to see if there's anything left, any tread on guys like a Justin Hunter, for example. And, Justin Hunter really struggled to even see some playing time too, because even though he was a veteran, I think they may have valued him more as a guy in practice and helping, bring up some of the young bucks and stuff like that and get them ready to, help them develop, is what I'm trying to get at here. So, I don't know. I wouldn't be too shocked, but I just don't see, again, this is all pending CBA stuff. We know there's larger fish to fry. They've got Bud Dupree. They've got some restricted free agents like a Mike Hilton, some of the guys on the line. They're going to have to take care of some of those things.
BJ Finney, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think BJ, unfortunately, unless
I think he's gone. No, I think he's gone, but
yeah.
I don't want him to be.
Yeah, and it's the same way I feel about Hargrave, but I mean, there's no way they could pay Bud and Hargrave, I think, in the same season here. And take care of things like extending Cam Hayward and trying to figure out what goes on with Juju or Connor a year from now, too. And, some of those are wait and see. I think Connor's a wait and see based on, he's been banged up and stuff like that. They've definitely given the seal of approval on moving forward with him. And even if they played with a committee, there's Benny Snell who could still develop and move up. We've talked about running backs and stuff like that. There's guys like Akers that's out there, J.K. Dobbins and stuff like that. And I necessarily wouldn't be heartbroken to have one of those guys added. I just think it makes the running back room a little more crowded, and it forces your hand on is Benny Snell like the odd man out and you immediately cut ties with him after 1 year? You don't really know what kind of player he is at this point. Whereas with the wide receiver group, they're all young guys, but I think we kind of have an idea of where everything is going when you're looking at, who Juju is, what Juju's capable of. We still don't know where the ceiling is for James Washington. We may have seen it already. Deontay Johnson, unknown. We really don't know just yet. Looked great last year. Hopefully continues to ascend. I think we know where Ryan Switzer is. I think we know where Johnny Holton is. And I think for all intents and purposes, I kind of like where Deion Kane is. Deion Kane played 6 games, but one of them only 1 snap. And so, those 5 catches coming into 5 games, and those were really some really poor offensive showings by the Steelers at that point too. So, but he did have that one big catch. And I remember when these guys get the opportunity and their numbers called and they make a play like that, I smile. I have a grin, Brian, from ear to ear. I love seeing it. So I hope we get to see more of it in the coming months. Training camp and everything like that. James Washington has been a camp phenom for 2 years now, 3 years. We'll see.
Yep.
We'll see what ends up going on with that too. I mean, he absolutely, and he looked like it in the preseason too. So we'll continue to see if his star is rising, but I don't think any type of draft pick will be a wasted pick. I think the higher they go, it just depends on if another Juju's sitting there, they could very well pull the trigger. Or are they going to try and go, Martavis Bryant was a 4th rounder, so let's not forget about somebody that's, in the middle rounds.
Yeah, I'm wherever they go, I think this is such a deep wide receiver draft class. Wherever they go and wherever they target, I think they're going to get somebody that has the potential to come in and make an impact. It's such an interesting time because of the convolution with the CBA, all the delays, the outcry by some of the veterans, and the rebuttal by some of the less known individuals or more working class Joe kind of players. It'll be interesting to see how all this turns around. I think as a Steelers fan, take the players' sides out of it. Either way, you want this CBA to get approved so that the team can try and lock in a lot of things. You don't want this to linger past free agency heavily because it's going to limit what you can do. So
yeah, if they operate under make no bones about it, it's going to be a very tough pill to swallow if they operate under the previous CBA. Even the 17th game thing, hey, I would totally forego that just to get a higher salary cap. Let's bring the money in. Let's back up the Brinks trucks here and get Bud paid. And just one final thought on that too is Bud is very complimentary. We're talking about the wide receivers complimenting each other. You know what I mean? And helping to create mismatches and things of that nature. So I think T.J. Watt's Defensive Player of the Year bid and campaign and year definitely is affected by Bud Dupree. So I'm eventually going to go and look and see what these guys did when either one of them weren't on the field, but that didn't happen a whole lot too often. But once you finally get that pair of guys, Kevin Green, Greg Lloyd, who else did we have? There was Lamar Woodley, James Harrison. I think you got to keep those guys together too. So crossing fingers, we'll see what ends up happening, Brian. So thanks once again for joining me today.
Always a pleasure, and I'm happy to be here with my brother from another mother.
Snoochie Boochies. So had to throw it in there. You know what? I always bring everything full circle. So until next time, folks, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. My name's Joe. His name's Brian, and we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.